Welcome to the future, where the glass is half full and you'll need new glasses, where you'll be jumping from conclusions.
The past is annulled, and a new future is born.
Never before in history has so much meant so little to so many. AD on the radio.
You know, if you are like me and a lot of people, that have been emailing me recently about this whole Kavanaugh situation, the question has come up over and over again in your mind. Why are they doubling down on Kavanaugh? I mean, the easiest path from A to B tends to be a straight line, and the Kavanaugh line has been more than a little meandering and taking some twists and turns. So why Kavanaugh? Why not just go, he's political poison? Perhaps we should move on to a candidate without these doubts and aspersions being cast onto him. We should find someone a little bit more unimpeachable. We should make our lives easier. Kavanaugh is not the only potential person that could be on our side in the Supreme Court. Why are they sticking with him? This is the question. And, well, I think there's a very, very good reason for this. I think it has to do with the conservative base staying home come election day. And we'll get into that in just a little bit. But I thought you and I should chat for a second about that Fox News interview that Kavanaugh did. I mean, the big takeaway from it was that Kavanaugh was a good Catholic boy, or someone who lacked game. Or, why not both? The big takeaway was that one quote that you've seen on memes all over the interwebs over the past 24 hours. I did not have sexual intercourse or anything close to sexual intercourse in high school or for many years thereafter. And, you know, it's kind of interesting because that first accusation does not deal with sexual intercourse. It has to do with attempted stuff happening, unsuccessful. So it really doesn't speak to anything that he didn't succeed in doing the deed. What he's been accused of is trying through assault to do the deed and failing. So it was a weird thing to come up. But did you watch it? I mean, overall, I thought he did a good job. It's not necessarily going to change anyone's mind. What happened on Fox News' Martha McCallum's show with regard to the Brett Kavanaugh interview. They trotted out Kavanaugh. They trotted out his wife. And he basically just said over and over again, he didn't do it. They spoke with McCallum in the first press appearance he's made since two women have brought allegations of sexual misconduct against him. And, you know, do you think it's something that he had to do? He should have done? I mean, he's going to testify. He's going to testify on Thursday. Was it necessary to give an interview? I don't necessarily know that it was. I mean, I guess it sort of shows, hey, I got nothing to hide. I'm willing to go on national TV. There's that vibe. But you're going on Fox News to do it. You're not exactly evangelizing to anyone other than the choir, who already sort of seems to believe in you. So I didn't really get the outlet, the chosen outlet. Anyone that could possibly potentially be on the fence about this guy isn't going to go, oh, well, it was on Fox News, therefore I'm all in. You need to wander into the lion's den a little bit more if you're going to convince people that you are doing the right thing in a tough situation. But anyways, he said, I'm just asking for a fair process where I can be heard, where I can defend my integrity. I've always treated women with dignity and respect. He said, I never sexually assaulted anyone in high school or otherwise. Again and again and again. He trotted that phrase out. Christine Ford accused him of what she accused him. She said that he tried to force himself on her in high school. Deborah Ramirez, the second accuser, said during a drinking game at Yale, he exposed himself to her while they were in college. And he has that one phrase that he's been trotting out since the beginning of this. And just the fact that he went on Fox News and said it on TV didn't really make that much of a freaking difference. So I have a hard time understanding what the purpose of the whole exercise was. But yeah, I've never sexually assaulted anyone in high school or otherwise. There was one interesting nugget of information that I thought we needed to pay attention to with regard to Kavanaugh's interview yesterday. And we'll get into that next. Plus, why are they sticking with him? Why are they doubling down on Kavanaugh? This is important too. We'll get into that directly ahead as well.
Real radio. 104.1.
Where the left and right come together for fundamental truths. AD on the radio, on Twitter at ADSXE.
You know, there's so much going on with this Kavanaugh thing that the questions keep coming in thick and fast. Regina said, why is Amnesty International getting involved? Oh, well, I mean, okay. Look, it's important to make the distinction between Amnesty International asking for the Kavanaugh nomination to be halted and the numerous allegations of sexual assault and impropriety that have been leveled against Kavanaugh. That's a whole different, let's just talk about it now, shall we? Amnesty International has a problem with Kavanaugh, but like I said, it's nothing to do with the allegations of sexual assault. Amnesty International is calling on senators to halt the nomination of Brett Kavanaugh over, quote, possible involvement in human rights violations after the terror attacks on September 11th, 2001. They said yesterday that he might have been involved in, quote, issues related to torture and rendition after 9/11. They said more information must be made public to determine Kavanaugh's role in relation to such practices. Amnesty International has long called for declassification of any documents or other materials depicting or describing enforced disappearance, torture, or other cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or other human rights violations, including acts of abduction and rendition by U.S. or non-U.S. personnel after the attacks in the USA on September 11th, 2001. Now, we do know that Kavanaugh was working in the George W. Bush administration at the time. And that's what Amnesty International's beef is with Kavanaugh. It is unprecedented that an organization like Amnesty International get involved on this level. They're calling for a freeze on Kavanaugh's confirmation process until these documents are publicly released. They said that basically you can't have someone in the Supreme Court on that kind of level because you haven't vetted him sufficiently. If these documents that may or may not reveal that he had knowledge of or was party to post 9/11 human rights violations involving torture and rendition, if we don't get access to these documents, then he hasn't been sufficiently vetted for his gig in the Supreme Court. Does that make sense? So like I said, the Amnesty International thing, that has nothing to do with the sexual assault allegations. And Amnesty International, while they are a powerful voice, unless I'm really, really mistaken, they don't necessarily have any real part to play in our political process. I mean, that said, our political process has become one dominated by powerful voices. People with the most Twitter followers can disrupt the course of history in 2018 and beyond. So there is that. But yeah, it is an unusual situation for Amnesty International to get involved in our Supreme Court. Make no mistake, we live in highly interesting times. We've talked about this numerous times on the show. But have you ever had one of those moments where you could say, I was there when? The only time I'd ever had that in the past was when I saw Bartolo Colon hit his only career home run in San Diego when the Mets played the Padres. And it's amazing. It's amazing when you're living through an historical event, because you see it happen, and then it starts to dawn on you what's happening. And then as you become aware of the fact that this might be historical, from the moment that ball hit Cologne's bat, and we all went, oh my gosh, he got a hit. Oh my gosh, it looks like it's going. Oh my gosh, it's going to be a home run. Oh my gosh, this is the only home run Bartolo Colon ever hit. We're living here through history. All these thoughts occur to you, and it seems like the moment slows down. So if it feels like you're watching this Kavanaugh thing happen in slow motion, well, there's a reason for that. You're living through something that is historically unique, at least in our lifetime. Anyways, Amnesty International said the vote on Kavanaugh should be further postponed until any information relevant to Kavanaugh's possible involvement in human rights violations, including in relation to the U.S. government's use of torture and other forms of ill treatment, such as during the CIA detention program, is declassified and made public. The Democrats are dogpiling in on this one. Dianne Feinstein, Patrick Leahy, and Dick Durbin back in August made a similar request. But this is before the whole let's derail him with a sexual assault allegation thing really picked up some steam. But they called for declassification of documents from Kavanaugh's time in the White House after 9/11. And you know what? If you really want to derail the whole process, that seems to be a little bit more of a sure thing. But sexual assault, well, that's all flashy, tabloid headline grabby. And that seems to be, at the moment, the Democrats' best chance of either slowing this thing down until election time or making it stop altogether. So yeah, like I said, you are living through an historical time. Unprecedented things are happening. And, well, the entire world, make no mistake about it, will be watching on Thursday. And you know what, generally speaking, I kind of let things happen, read the internet cliff notes, don't respond to the salacious after-the-fact reporting by either side of the political spectrum and make up my own mind, but I will be watching that in real time. Anyways, more on why Republicans are doubling down on Kavanaugh instead of finding something that seems to be an easier road to hoe next.
For more stimulation and less irritation, 9 out of 10 doctors choose KPRC AM 950, Houston's more stimulating talk radio.
Don't get the blues, get all the news. We mean all of you guys out there in Radio Land. All aboard!
He's back. AD on the radio.
Give it up, yeah. Give it up, yeah. Bring this on, come on, come on.
So, you know, what's kind of interesting, and definitely a layer of the onion that's worth peeling back in this situation, is that the Senate Judiciary Committee, they scheduled a vote when? Friday morning. Friday morning on Brett Kavanaugh's nomination to the Supreme Court. The vote on Kavanaugh, which basically could be pushed past Friday, comes hot on the heels after he's scheduled to testify in front of the panel on allegations of sexual misconduct. Now, here's... I mean, you see where we're going with this, right? You see how, I guess insincere is probably the best way of describing it. You see how insincere this looks. I mean, over and over again, Kavanaugh supporters have said, well, yes, we think that it needs to be fair and both parties need an opportunity to testify. Great. Cool. So after he testifies, we'll get him right in there. That's when we're going to have the vote. That's when it's going to be literally less than 24 hours after no sort of time to kick back and kind of take in what you've seen or not seen. And that could go either way. that could really go either way. I mean, folks might want to mull it over a little bit, feel rushed into a decision, say, with the evidence in front of me, I just can't really sort of, can't make up my mind. And gosh, it would be really bad if we gave someone this role that was guilty of these things, and I'm having a problem with that reasonable doubt thing. So I'm just gonna dodge the bullet and say no. But it doesn't look sincere. It doesn't look like they actually care about what happens when Kavanaugh and Ford testify on Thursday. It looks like it's 100 million% for show, so they can be seen to be doing the right thing and then just go ahead and do whatever the hell they were going to do in the first place. As a procedural matter, the Judiciary Committee today noticed a potential executive business meeting for Friday, September 28th at 9:30 a.m. This is Judiciary Committee Chairman Chuck Grassley. Committee rules normally require executive business meetings to be noticed 3 days in advance, so an executive business meeting is being noticed tonight in the event that a majority of the members are prepared to hold one on Friday. Basically saying, hey, this is happening. This is happening. We're not waiting. You got a 3-day window to announce this sort of thing. We're announcing it now. We're not waiting to announce it till after people testify. Now, here's what's kind of interesting. I don't know if you've been following this sort of thing, but Republicans have a 1-seat majority on the committee that decides whether or not Kavanaugh makes it to the Supreme Court. Republicans have a 1-seat majority on the committee. So what's stopping it from being a slam dunk bazinga for the Republicans? Well, it's Jeff Flake. Jeff Flake of Arizona, a Republican, hasn't said whether or not he's going to be supporting Kavanaugh, at least not at the time that we're doing this. You might have heard differently by the time it airs wherever you are, depending on where and when you're listening. But that guy's in an interesting situation at the moment. Anyways, if Flake and all the Democrats who are anti-Kavanaugh vote against him, Trump's nominee won't be able to be sent to the Senate with a favorable recommendation that he gets a Supreme Court gig. So there you go. It's not easy. It is not easy. The fight that Republicans are having to put up for Kavanaugh. It's not an easy road to hoe. So, like we were asking, sort of more toward the beginning of the show, why? Why Kavanaugh? Why are we so hell-bent on this guy? Why are Republicans so hell-bent on this guy? If the quickest path, the path of least resistance from A to B is a straight line, why deal with all the twists and turns and the doubt that's being cast on the future of the Supreme Court by these accusations against Kavanaugh? Why are the Republicans not going to plan B? Why are they willing to stick their necks out for this guy so freaking far? I mean, it's not a good look. It's not a good look to be going, he definitely didn't do this to women, especially in this day and age. I mean, you don't look cool if you risk alienating many, many voters if you're being hardline in your support of Kavanaugh and some piece of evidence popped up or something that's just too difficult to get around pops up. These are very real things that we're talking about. These are very real things that are unbelievably hot button issues in the year 2018. In the wake of Me Too, a man making it to the Supreme Court after he's been accused of multiple instances of sexual assault and impropriety. You don't want to be on the wrong side of the historical argument on this one. So why Are Republicans willing to get their hands so unbelievably dirty, potentially, on Kavanaugh? What's he ever done for them? What's a big freaking deal? Does he have compromising pictures of every Republican senator? Why? What's so great about Kavanaugh? Well, it's not that Kavanaugh is so great. I mean, look, there's 2 accusations of sexual misconduct and assault against Kavanaugh. And there's a 3rd one brewing, according to Michael Avenatti. Now, look, we've discussed this in the past. You got to consider the source with Michael Avenatti. Is this a guy whose name you knew a year and a half ago? No. Does he like it that way? Did he represent Stormy Daniels to get his name out there? Is he motivated by the opportunity all of this affords him to raise his profile? Absolutely. Do we then treat things that come from Avenatti with a bit of a grain of salt? Sure. But Avenatti is saying that he's got something that is almost impossible to get around. Damning evidence. And he's demanding an opportunity to be heard and to have his client be heard. So that's 3 situations that could be difficult to get around. And even after these accusations of sexual misconduct against Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh continue to surface, Republicans are doubling down on him. They're not talking about plan B or C. Donald Trump said, I am with him all the way. I look forward to a vote. There's a whole bunch of senators, well, pretty much everyone, every Republican, except for Flake, who say the same thing. And they're pushing for that vote on Friday as soon as humanly possible. Ford set to testify Thursday. Deborah Ramirez came forward with new allegations of sexual misconduct. There was that article in the New Yorker. So what's the deal? I mean, like I said, it's not the path of least resistance. It's not a straight line. It meanders. It's dangerous. You could wind up on the wrong side of history. You could look really, really bad if you're doubling down on Kavanaugh. And Kavanaugh turns out to be the sleazebag that everybody's saying he is. Oh, well, half the country is saying he is. But here is why I think, and I could be wrong, but here's why I think Republicans are willing to go the long haul with Kavanaugh. Why they're willing to do the heavy lifting and stick their necks out and take this, what is, let's be real here, a massive risk. Republicans are taking a massive risk on Kavanaugh. I think it's because the old school grassroots conservative types, maybe even older, not just old school, but older voters, they want their guy. Their Supreme Court justice, they want their guy confirmed. And I think that the right is concerned that if they don't get their guy confirmed, then they start to lose faith in the political process. Then they feel like their party isn't doing the right thing by them. Their party isn't taking the opportunity to get the bull by the horns and put someone in the Supreme Court that represents what they see as their values. The evangelicals, I think, for want of a better expression, are the people that they don't want to upset. The evangelical base for the Republican Party. And this is where it's so unfortunate that religion and politics have been so inexorably conflated in this country. Because, look, we have this idea of separation of church and state, and that is a complete and utter failure. Church has so much influence on the state, and it's so freaking wrong and so freaking corrupt. Get the church the hell out of politics. Get politics the hell out of the church. But I digress. That's a whole other conversation for us to have. But these are the folks that conservatives, the president, everyone involved that's stumping for Kavanaugh at the moment. These are the folks that they don't want to upset because they feel like if they can't, like I said, take the bull by the horns and put a guy into the Supreme Court that is representative of the evangelical values that they find to be so important. If they can't make that happen, then they're worried that the Republican evangelical base is just going to be like, man, you know what? Had it with this process, had it with these people. You know what I'm going to do on election day? Reorganize my sock drawer. That's what our political process amounts to. If it can be derailed by a bunch of angry feet stampers, if they couldn't get Kavanaugh in there, what's the point of anything? Pass the popcorn. We're staying home. And, well, if that happens, if the evangelical Republican base stays home on election day, that Republican majority, that suddenly starts to look awfully precarious. Now, like I said, I'm kind of here for the show. I don't buy into the idea of republicanism or being a Democrat in any way, shape, or form. I think it's Coke and Pepsi. I think it's brown sugary water that you ought not drink too much of. I don't think there's that much of a difference between Republicans and Democrats. And I think aligning yourself with a particular political party makes you subject to knee-jerk reactionaryism. Is that a word? Well, you get my point. But one of the things that absolutely amazes me is how unbelievably loyal the evangelicals are to Donald Trump. There's like an evangelical report card or something like that. And Donald Trump is not necessarily what you would call a paragon of spiritual virtue. And he talks it a little bit, and he doesn't make a ton of effort to walk it like he talks it. He's not a pulpit thumping type of president. And he's got numerous strikes against him. The Billy Bush tape, obviously, being the one that I think most people were surprised didn't destroy the evangelical loyalty to Trump. But there you go. The evangelicals, the old school Republican evangelical base, the religiously motivated and therefore much easier to control base of voters that are represented by evangelicals, if they can't get Kavanaugh in, they're worried those folks are going to stay the hell home, and then poof, there goes your Republican majority. Yep, that's what I think. Feel free to agree or disagree. At ADSXE, this is where you can find me on Twitter and Instagram, or you can email me ad@iheartradio.com.
Now, more AD on the radio.
So yeah, that's about it. That's what I think. I think the reason that Kavanaugh is being doubled down on by Republicans is because, well, you don't get Kavanaugh in, you alienate the evangelical, old school, conservative Republican base. And, well, they decide they're going to stay home come election day. That was my thinking on it. And you know what? Actually, I dug around a little bit. There's, straight from the horse's mouth. Now, I don't know if you caught it or not, but Ralph Reed, an evangelical leader, he actually spoke to the New York Times a little while ago. And he said, if Republicans were to fail to defend and confirm such an obviously and eminently qualified and decent nominee, then that's the thing. He's not obviously decent. You can say he's eminently qualified based on his resume, but the whole sort of decency thing, Okay. Let's just gloss over that. But this dude, Ralph Reed, told the New York Times this past week just gone by, if Republicans were to fail to defend and confirm such an obviously and eminently qualified and decent nominee, then it will be very difficult to motivate and energize faith-based and conservative voters in November. See what that is? That's the evangelicals going, hey, political process on the Republican side, we've got you by the short and curlies we're about to squeeze. That's basically a line in the sand. That's an ultimatum. Either you get Kavanaugh in or we're staying home. It's like I said, wow, I didn't realize they were so upfront and honest and open about it. Republicans could actually increase their Senate majority. They're supposed to hold on to it. There's a very good chance that they could make it that much more large and unwieldy after the elections. There's Democrats running in states that Trump won, which indicates their chances are not so great. And, well, the Supreme Court nomination of Brett Kavanaugh was going to be sort of a feather in the cap of the whole thing. Watch us as we not only hold on to our majority, but expand it. But now that Kavanaugh has been accused of sexual misconduct by two, possibly a third woman, now that that's happened, the dream of a permanent conservative majority in the highest court in the land is looking like it could be fading off into the distance. And like I said, this is basically evangelicals going, we've got you. We've got you by the short and the curlies. And Republicans, we're on the same side as you. We are Republicans, but let's just recognize who calls the shots around here. We do, and we do it in the name of Jesus. Or something like that. I don't know. And look, I would never, ever, ever in a million bazillion years deny anybody their right to their faith. But this idea that church and state should be separated, I'm a big believer in that. I think you corrupt everything. You corrupt everything that's great about spirituality when you involve politics in it. You corrupt anything that's fair and right about politics when you allow people to intrude upon the process with the belief that if their person doesn't get in, they are, or we are as a nation, blowing it with God. It's just so distinctly un-American. Yet it's become the norm. I don't understand that. So look, I'm not in any way, shape, or form denying people their right to their spirituality and their beliefs. But, ugh, so shady having religion and politics. There's the whole idea of separation of church and state, and our founding fathers recognized that it was shady, and that was why it was something that we talked about back in the day when we were setting up how this country would... Anyways, don't get me started. Like I said, it's a whole other show. Now, Kavanaugh is not necessarily that popular. And he's a nominee by an unpopular president. He's a divisive guy. And he's been spearheaded by a divisive president. There's still plenty of Republicans that go, oh man, really? Ugh. You know, it's interesting. I noticed that a lot of the talk radio types really seem to relish and enjoy the fact that Donald Trump does and says things that they find to be morally abhorrent. Because if your guy is in charge or your girl is in charge, the position of we're free-thinking rebels that a lot of talk radio types really enjoy, it's kind of harder to sell when you got your way. When everything's going your way and everything is playing out the way you said it should pre-election, it makes you less interesting. You got nothing to rail against, nothing to fight against, no underdog story to sell. But when you are a Republican that can find it in themselves to be morally diametrically opposed to some of the things that a guy like Donald Trump says and does, boy, it does you good. Makes you that much more interesting. People need to feel like they're the underdog sticking up for what is right. The lone warrior for dignity and morality in whatever town you happen to be on. It's something that you'll hear a lot of people trot out if you flip through the radio dial. Not here, not on this show. We occupy the very lonely space of common sense. But, yeah, Donald Trump is not a slam dunk for Republicans. And neither is Kavanaugh, for that matter. So, it's an interesting one. And it really speaks to the level of power and control that religion has when it comes to our political process in this country, that a guy who's been accused of sexual assault by multiple women, who is spearheaded by a president that's not necessarily a slam dunk in the popularity stakes, and who himself is not necessarily a slam dunk in the popularity stakes, is being railroaded through. Like I said, it speaks to the level of power and influence that religion has in politics, and if that doesn't make you kind of freaking uncomfortable, well, that is where you and I are different, my friend.
Leave the stimulation to the professionals.
Everyone is so smart.
KPRC, more stimulating talk radio.
There's something happening here, and you should know what it is.
The dumbing up of America. Now, more AD on the radio.
Oh, you know, one last thing before we bail on the whole topic of Kavanaugh and get into the news. One very interesting thing with regard to Brett Kavanaugh's defense of his unimpeachable character was the fact that he said he has calendars, like social calendars, showing what he did in 1982 that he saved since 1982. Do you document your social life that well when you're a freshman in high school or when you're in high school? I mean, maybe you do, maybe you don't. The concept is a bit foreign and alien to me. But the somewhat absurd nature of this particular line of defense was pointed out by a whole bunch of late-night talk show hosts who had, well, they were given plenty of ammunition to use, and use it they did.
On Thursday, Judge Kavanaugh and his first accuser, Professor Christine Blasey Ford, both of them will testify before the Senate Judiciary Committee. Professor Ford claims Kavanaugh tried to sexually assault her at a high school party. He claims that he kept calendars detailing his social engagements from 1982 that will help to exonerate him. Okay, what 17-year-old keeps calendars of his social engagement? No wonder he was a virgin.
James Corden also had an interesting piece of insight with regard to why people do or do not document what they've been doing with their lives in extensive diaries and calendars.
Trump's Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh is pushing back on sexual assault allegations. According to the New York Times, his defense will include a high school calendar from 1982 that does not list the party where the alleged incident took place. Well, this should clear everything up. Because I know when I plan to commit a crime, I always write committing a crime on my calendar. How does this prove anything? I wrote run a half marathon on my calendar in June. You know what I didn't do in June? Run a half marathon. It's ridiculous.
And just on the off chance that you happen to miss it, here is Kavanaugh saying that he got no sweet lovin' in high school and for many years thereafter.
I did not have sexual intercourse or anything close to sexual intercourse in high school or for many years thereafter.
Through all these years that are in question, you were a virgin.
That's correct.
Never had sexual intercourse with anyone in high school?
Correct.
And through what years in college, since we're probing into your personal life here?
Many years after. I'll leave it at that. Many years after.
So there you have it. So, question for you. Do you worry about that whole life-work balance thing? Work-life balance? I don't know what the proper way to say it is. All I know is I do not have it. But you may. you might have a really well-rounded life that makes the most out of all facets of it. You might be extraordinarily well-balanced in the way that you go through the world. And to that end, you and I will discuss the signs that you have a well-rounded life. I've actually been through, I've glanced at this list before. I'm not it. I don't do, well, let's see, there's 10 signs that you have a well-rounded life. I do none of them. Almost none of them. Occasionally, anyways. We'll talk about your life and why it might be so much more well-rounded than mine after we get into the news. You see that Selena Gomez, because this is the type of hard-hitting news we tackle on this show. Hey, man, we did like 45 minutes on Kavanaugh earlier. We need a little break. We need some mental chewing gum, you and I think. Yeah, so Selena Gomez story it is. Selena Gomez has gone on the record saying that Taylor Swift is so smart it freaks her out. Yeah, she said Taylor Swift is so smart that it freaks her out. And again, Selena Gomez is used to hanging out with Justin Bieber, so the bar is low. Happy birthday to Chachi from Happy Days, Scott Baio. Scott Baio turned 58. Man, isn't it incredible? Isn't it incredible how you see somebody on television? You grow up with them on television. You're just used to seeing somebody in a certain way, and they get fixed in your mind in that way. For me, I never watched Charles in Charge or any of his other shows, so yeah, Scott Baio will always be Chachi from Happy Days to me. And as it turns out, Scott Baio is no longer Chachi. Scott Baio turned 58 this past Saturday just gone by. Yeah, Scott Baio is now 58 years old. Apparently he celebrated with friends and family at the Olive Garden. But only because I believe he gets a 15% employee discount. The guys in Toto have gone on the record saying they can't believe Africa is so popular right now. I was looking for Weezer's cover of Africa on YouTube the other day, and I came across like some guy that did a metal version of Africa. It was all right, it was good, but like had something like 25 million views on it. Like, people cannot get enough of that song. I understand why. It's great. It's amazing. Got one of the most soaring choruses in the history of soaring choruses. But the guys in Toto say they're sick of the song and they can't believe Africa is so popular right now. But at this point, it's just a gift that people continue to be interested in work that they've cranked out. There you go. Someone is selling beat-up shoes with duct tape on them for $530. Yeah, someone's selling beat-up shoes with duct tape on them for $530. Or, I mean, you could just buy a $60 pair and trade them with mine for the real deal. I always have one pair of shoes that's held together by duct tape. It's not a good look, but it's a look that I stick with. Well, you know how we talked about the reason that Nike don't care what you think? Nike, with their support of Colin Kaepernick and their use of Colin Kaepernick as an endorser and giving Colin Kaepernick a clothing line, they don't care about people on Facebook. They don't care about the memes. They care about people that are too young to think that Facebook is a viable form of communication for them. They're after the opinions of 15-year-old and under people. And, well, this is the thing. We all made up our minds about the type of sneakers we were going to wear long ago, and I made up my mind because of Run DMC that I was Adidas all the way. Please don't let Adidas get political. I would be so bummed out. I mean, we talked about this the other week on the show, but 95% of the sneakers I own are Adidas. And if all of a sudden the vast majority of the shoes that I wore became synonymous with a political movement, I would be so disappointed. Just because I don't want my sneakers to be a political statement. I just want them to be cool and keep my feet warm or dry. If Adidas get all political, I'll be so unbelievably disappointed. But yeah, I actually do tape up my sneakers. I have, well, like I said, got 3 pairs of Adidas at any time. I've got the ones that are basically galoshes. I've got the everyday Adidas, and then I've got the crispy, brand spanking new ones that I break out for special occasions. And as one pair gets older, they get rotated down. And I have been guilty of putting duct tape on my galosh pair of Adidas. Like, I got to go walk Millhouse, and I'm not willing to put on the pair of Adidas that's going to allow the water in, and it's a rainy day. And so, I've taped up my sneakers before. There you go. Apparently, duct tape on your sneakers now makes them worth $530. I'm significantly more well off in the shoe department than I previously thought. I am high fashion. I am the Imelda Marcos of the sneaker world, thanks to my duct tape usage. Oh, man. Oh, this is an interesting one. So generally speaking, if you hear about criminals stealing drugs, what do you think? You probably think opioids or perhaps something that could be used to cook meth with. But, man, in the case of these particular thieves, after they stole this particular drug, I just found myself feeling sorry for them and actually hoping that they get to keep the medication that they stole. Why was this? And what medication did they steal? Well, cops in Maryland are apparently on the lookout for a man and woman who stole hundreds and hundreds of dollars worth of diarrhea medication from a drugstore. Yeah, they stole hundreds and hundreds of dollars worth of diarrhea meds from a drugstore. Cops are on the lookout. Wow. I'm surprised the cops haven't caught him yet, only because how hard could it be to track him down? There's probably a trail to follow. Papa John's unveiled a new logo. Did you see this? Papa John's unveiled a new logo. Right. Good for them. Because, that's the problem with Papa John's. The logo. California has banned restaurants from giving out plastic straws without someone asking for one first. So if you're in California, you will not get a plastic straw unless you first ask for one. They're all about the marijuana-infused straws. Plastic, not so much. There you go. President Trump says he'll get rid of the lingering stench at the Department of Justice and the FBI. The lingering stench. He's going to get rid of the lingering stench. That's a little odd, only because, as far as I knew, lingering stench was Don Jr.'s Secret Service code name. A Virginia man was arrested for pulling down his pants, rubbing food on his butt, and then putting it back on the shelves. Oh, that's my freaking nightmare. The idea that somebody touched the food that I'm going to eat before I eat it. Like, I'm amazed I could ever eat in a restaurant at all, just because the idea that people have touched this food, I don't care if they're chefs, I don't care how many times they wash their hands. If I think about other people's hands on my food, I start to get distinctly uneasy and queasy. I'm definitely a bit of, a germaphobe when it comes to this sort of thing. So the idea of a man pulling down his pants, rubbing food on his butt, then putting it back on the shelves, that is literally my nightmare. But yeah, a Virginia man was arrested recently for pulling down his pants, rubbing food on his butt, and then putting it back on the shelves. Or, as Andy Dick calls it, grocery shopping. A woman in Spain. Oh, this is this is an interesting one. A woman in Spain has gone on the record claiming that she found a dead turtle inside her most intimate of areas. I think part of the reason why she's claiming that it was, here's the thing. I believe that Spanish authorities think that perhaps she was abusing this turtle and that's how it died in that situation. Yeah. A woman in Spain, in defense of herself when accused by authorities that this turtle died because she was putting it there, says that she just found a dead turtle in her most intimate of lady areas. I wonder if she'll write a book about it. The tortoise and the hares. Do we have time for any more news, or should we just talk about how you have a well-balanced life? Let's do... let's do just a little bit more news. Kiss have announced that their forthcoming tour will be their last. They realized, I think, it was time to call it quits when they realized they could only rock and roll until 9 o'clock and party every other day. Michael Moore says he'll move to Canada if his new anti-Trump movie gets him in trouble. Doesn't seem to be getting him anything. I think it bombed at the box office. Yeah, Michael Moore says he'll move to Canada if his new anti-Trump movie gets him in trouble. Be a bittersweet move for Moore. On the one hand, better health care. On the other hand, fewer Arby's. All right, let's talk about the signs that you have a well-balanced life. I do none of these things. A new survey asks people what goes into having a good work-life balance, and here are the picks for the top 10 things you do that show you've got a well-rounded situation going on. 1. Spending time with your family. 2. Watching TV and movies. 3. Getting enough sleep. 4. Taking time for yourself every day. 5. Listening to music and podcasts. If you're listening to this over podcast, well done. Your life is well-rounded. 6. Spending time with friends. Keeping your house clean and organized. Having a little sweet nookie every now and then. Spending time outdoors in nature. And finally, spending time with a pet. That's the only one I do. And you know what? I think out of all the ones that I could be participating in, that it would show that I would have a well-rounded life, I think I get the most out of Snuggles with Millhouse. That is it for me. Thank you so much for hanging. Thank you for being a part of my radio family. As always, the time that you and I spend together, best part of my day every single day. I'll be back tomorrow. We'll do it all over again. Later.